an intro. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Guess I just covered the introduction and welcome right here in the room. Myself, Kate Overacker from staff. Rob Cully from staff is here. Stephanie, you're on the call, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We have Mike Smith from National Grid. God, here in the room. Alex and Jeriana from Con Edison in the room. And if folks don't mind, the other utility presenters, can you let me know who's on the call? We'll start with Central Hudson. Marwa, I think I saw your name.
Yeah, it's Marwa Chowdhury here from Central Hudson, and I believe I'm the only one on the call at this moment.
Okay. Andrew from NYSEG, Argini, are you on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Andrew Ladra from NYSEG and Argini, and I have some folks from my company as well on. They can introduce themselves quickly.
This is Emily with, Emily McKee with NYSEG and Argini.
And this is Paul Gray with Grid.
Okay, thank you. And, oh, sorry.
No, I think that was it, Kate.
Okay. And Des, are you on from ONR?
Yes, this is Desmond Ofori from ONR, and I'm here with John.
Okay.
John Helowitz.
Yep. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. Okay. We're gonna go through the WebEx participation guidelines in a little bit. Utilities, you'll present your annual review of the 2024 summer capability period and discuss any potential changes for next year. The utilities are also presenting their upcoming residential energy storage demand response program. Central Hudson Grid, NYSEG, Argini, and ONR will present theirs first, and then Con Edison will take up from their presentation and present their res battery second. And that should cover it all. We'll do a wrap up after that.
Hi, Kate. It's Rick Schuler from staff. I'm here, and I noticed there's some folks from non-utility parties here as well.
Okay. Anyone from the non-utilities want to introduce themselves? Hi. Well, I don't know.
Hi, I'm Justine Alston Payne. I'm from the LIO OMI office.
Okay, I didn't catch that.
I got it.
You got Aaron Breidenbaugh from Sea Power. If you can hear me.
This is Baron Argetsinger for Keys and Fox.
Hi, this is Bill Acker from New York West.
Hi, Arthur Pearson from Blueprint Power.
Caroline Wall from the department.
Sean Eisenhower from DPS.
Grace Subramanian from David Energy.
Caitlin Edmondson, DPS.
Valerie Ross, Logical Buildings.
Maria Joel from Logical Buildings.
Hi, this is Frank Bruckner with Meltec.
Is there anybody else that needs to speak up?
Erica Bentley with Couch White.
Thank you. So I request that all participants, and most of you know this, to mute yourself. If you're not speaking, make sure you're muted. Only unmute to speak, raise a question. I do ask that anytime anybody, even here in the room, if we're speaking, we introduce ourselves, or say who we are, just for the sake of people on the phone not maybe knowing the voices of who's here, and us in the room maybe not, or the other people on the call not knowing who's asking the question. We'll take questions at the end of each presentation. Participants can enter questions into the chat feature. If you're addressing a specific utility, please state that. And anything that's not addressed here in the room, we will follow up. After today's session, the presentations are going to be available on the DMM system under the case number 140423. The session is being recorded, and that will also be uploaded into DMM. So, without further ado, we'll start off with the utility presentations, and we'll start off with Con Edison.
Great. Are you going to be advancing the slides? Yeah, great. You need to use that button. Perfect. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yep.
We can jump to the next slide. We'll go over CSRP and DLRP. 2024, we had 3 CSRP events. This was a heat wave, so they were back to back to back. And we had 31 DLRP events, as well as 1 test event. It was definitely a hotter year than prior years we've seen in recent history, resulting in significantly more events than what we've seen in the past. And our total program costs are shown there. So this chart shows customers enrolled, megawatts enrolled, and the reduction achieved across all of our programs for 2024 with 2023 as a comparison. What you'll see is we did increase customer enrollments by roughly 15,000 people. The number's not shown, but compared to last year, we enrolled 15,000 more customers. If you eliminate co-enrollments, we have now 43,000 customers across all of our programs. I think just continuing with a trend of growth, the megawatts enrolled across these programs also grew, which I think is a good story. The megawatt reductions achieved for 2024 were essentially stagnant from this year versus previous years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's mostly driven by the temperature, the hotter temperatures that we saw in 2024 versus 2023.
And one thing that we did change from 2023 is we changed some of our enrollment criteria. So we made sure that pledges were more accurate. So it doesn't necessarily impact actual reductions that we saw, but when aggregators were telling us how much to expect from any given customer, that we set a limit on. So the actual megawatts enrolled, it does look like it didn't grow from last year, but part of that is due to the criteria that we set in place for 2024.
Thanks, Sharon. This slide just builds on what we just said and what we showed in the last slide. So it's 2023 versus 2024 across all of the programs. So you can look at the customers enrolled and how they grew. Auto DLM did show a decrease, and that's because some contracts came to a close or some customers early exited. So expected. And then below that, you can see the performance of 2023 versus 2024. CSRP, we saw a decrease in performance. Again, we saw the heat wave, a 3-day back-to-back-to-back, also concurrent with NISO events. So that drop in performance can be explained by the temperatures that we saw this year versus last. We have another slide that goes into that in a bit more detail. And DLRP, we saw a jump in performance. And I think to Jeriana's point earlier, some of the way we processed and enrolled customers and the checks that we put in place to make sure that they were accurately putting in the right megawatt levels, we think resulted in some of that growth in the performance this year. So this slide looks at the different call windows and the performance in each of those call windows. Go for it.
Yeah, if you said you wanted to take questions at the end, I missed it. So just if you want them now.
I'm happy to take a question.
Okay, and maybe if people want to put their hands up in the video or the chat thing, that might make sense. On the previous slide, and you don't have to go back, was essentially all of the, oh, and also, hi, Jeriana. This is the first time I've almost seen you in person with the video. But can I assume that virtually all of the number of customers are residential customers, or did you also see a significant uptick in C&I?
Aaron, thanks for the question. So the majority of the growth was in the residential space.
Is that in the report? Well, it might be in the report that you filed. I don't know if it's in the presentation, but that might be useful to break out going forward. Just because
growth across sectors.
Yeah, well, really just kind of C&I versus residential, because like 10,000 or 15,000 residential customers, it seems like and is a lot of customers, and I'm sure you've felt that when it comes to registrations and whatnot, because you're looking to, have people renew and whatnot. But the actual megawatts associated with that is pretty small. So I think it makes sense to sort of distinguish between the two. But either way, I think it's good news all the way around. But yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
thanks.
Makes sense, Aaron. I appreciate the feedback. Sorry, just one last second. The second part of this slide just looks at the megawatts by the different tiers in DLRP and the performance across those. And then we can jump to the next slide. And this slide tells a little bit of a story on why we didn't see the expected jump in performance despite growing our programs. These bars represent the preceding 5 days before a CSRP event and the temperatures across those 5 days. The light blue bars look at 2023. The dark blue bars look at 2024. And what you can see is the average temperature or the TV, the temperature variable across the 5 preceding days before an event was several degrees higher this year than it was in last year. So not only did we have a CSRP event, 3 CSRP events back to back to back, so calling 3 days in a row, the days preceding it were roughly 3 degrees hotter before the first event even took place. So we kind of like pre-cooked customers, nature pre-cooked customers, and then we demanded them to perform. And so I think that that story shows up in the megawatt performance that we saw this year. Okay, yeah. So this, now we're jumping to DLM, away from our Rider T programs, and it's looking at the megawatts enrolled across term and auto DLM and the customers enrolled. That's the first table. The second one shows the procurement results for the 2 vintage years that we've held this year. You can see the megawatts bid into the program, as well as the number of applicants that bid in, and those that were accepted, and the megawatts that were cleared for those 2 vintage years. This is the first year that we've had 2 vintage years. I think it tells an interesting story when you look at 25 versus 26 and the significantly higher number of bids in auto DLM in 2026. So it really, I think, says a lot about what's in queue, in the interconnection queue. You know, so think batteries. And it, to some extent, term DLM also speaks volumes. You know, you're clearing more in 2025 versus 2026. And there's more bid into 25 and 26. So the types of customers that are bidding into term DLM, you can kind of infer from how they're bidding. So my takeaway here is splitting it into 2 vintage years, I think, is a bonus. We're able to move additional megawatts into term DLM, and specifically auto, sorry, not term DLM, into auto DLM in a way that I don't think we could do with the shorter time frame. This table shows performance across the events in 2024. The performance is strong, and I think that has a lot to do with the contractual obligations that are spelled out in the DLM process. So as expected, strong performance. And then this slide shows the costs, thermostats enrolled, megawatts enrolled, and performance achieved in our BYOT program.
Could you, sorry, I didn't hand, but to Bill Acker here in New York Best, just on the performance 2 slides ago, the 112%, could you just explain how you're assessing performance?
So we're using the baseline methodology that's published on our website, and it's looking at preceding days. I think five preceding days in the last 30 as compared to the performance on the actual day. Does that answer your question, Will?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
And then this is I believe the last slide we have. This is looking at the tariff changes that we implemented in 2024. Primarily 3 that took place. One was aligning the language in the tariff with the DEC emission standards required for economic engines that provide value in our programs. The second one is revising the call windows from starting the DLRP and the auto DLM call windows from starting originally at 6 a.m. We moved it to start at 8 a.m. to better align with interconnection and charging windows for some of the batteries that perform in our programs. And then we noted some of the peaking generators in our territory that were recently decommissioned There's an exclusion that does not allow generators to participate in our programs that are around those peaking generators. So we noted the ones that decommissioned, allowing some of those assets to participate. And then the second part of the slide is looking at the proposed changes for 2025. I think a lot of this has to do with enrollments, so rolling customer enrollments. And so this means if you enroll in 1 year, your enrollment remains year over year, unless you notify us of a change in an enrollment status. I think that's going to simplify the enrollment process for both our aggregators and for us. Extending customer enrollment windows, originally we have the 2 months preceding the actual performance capability period. Now we have essentially anytime we're not in the capability period, you can enroll. And that has a lot to do with simplifying duplicate enrollments for us. It gives us also more bandwidth to process as our programs have grown over the recent years. Adjusting DLRP voluntary event windows, we had, based on the way DLRP performs, you need essentially a 3, 4, 5, 6 hour period to get evaluation. You can't do a standard DLRP event past 9 p.m. And so we've extended the voluntary window to capture the 9 p.m. to midnight period to make sure that we don't have this dead spot in when we can call DLRP events. And then sub-aggregation changes within our tariff, we had a 50 kW minimum, both for aggregations and sub-aggregations. We've removed the 50 kW minimum for sub-aggregations. This becomes extremely relevant for the residential portion of the customer base that are participating in CSRP and DLRP, and our software can handle dealing with these smaller sub-aggregations. So I think in general, this is a benefit both for us and for the aggregators. Okay, I think that's it.
The next one goes on to.
Oh,
Okay.
that's okay. That's for residential storage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
We'll come back to that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you, guys.
any questions from for Con Edison before we move on? I guess one Alex and Jeriana that I would ask Kate, can you go back to the slide that has the different term and auto DLM enrollments? I think it's slide 8 there, yeah. There we go, this one, yeah. So with the kind of dual year procurement that you did this past year, looking out a little bit further past the 18-month time frame to get 26 in there too. You feel that was a big improvement on being able to get resources cleared through that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, these numbers speak for themselves, but I think for how backed up the interconnection queue is in our area, for the types of customers that are trying to get into auto DLM, the feedback that we've received is that having the later vintage year has been a boon.
So is that something that you're looking to continue?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Sorry for not being clear on that.
And it's surprising a little bit that you've had kind of a flip-flopping of which programs are seeming to be more attractive to getting participants to bid. There's, in years past, the term DLM offering has seemed to have been more widely bid into.
Yeah.
Did you have any insights on that?
I can speculate why that's happening. I think the first 2 years, aggregators are bidding in, trying to understand the program, seeing what costs looks like, seeing what bids get accepted and rejected. But for term DLM customers, the pricing, the commitment that they have to have for the 3 years versus CSRP and DLRP, I imagine if you're not a battery, if you are a battery, you're bidding into auto DLM. If you're not a battery, term DLM, the negative aspect of having to potentially not be as lucrative and get penalties, CSRP and DLRP look more lucrative or are a better business case, depending on the type of customer. There's some customers where term DLM, that longer term contract, 3 to 5 years, is still, even if they're not a battery, still a good incentive. But I think the first 2 years of the program, people were still trying to figure out what that looked like. And we're seeing some of the knowledge gained from our first few rounds. I don't know if you want to.
I mean, the only thing I can add, and an aggregator on the call can probably speak to this better, though I doubt they will. I would imagine if I were bidding into term DLM, they're bidding fairly conservatively because they don't want to overcommit because of the downside. And so you're going to have this balance of what is term DLM paying out versus CSRP, DLRP. How conservative do I have to be to ensure that I don't get into this penalty range if we don't actually perform with the type of asset that I have, and finding a balance that works. And so there's a premium, and you're going to see it, but it's you got to be really precise in how you execute.
I'm curious if any of our aggregator friends on the call here care to confirm or deny that those hypotheses. Would love to hear it. If you don't, that's fine too. But we're trying to foster kind of a more open discussion with these sort of stakeholder sessions. Going once, going twice. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I did not see any other hands raised or messages come in through the chat. So I think then we can move on to our next presentation.
Okay. Mara, we're ready for you to take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Kate. Hey everyone, this is Marwa. I'm going to show my video in case anyone was curious. I'm an associate program manager over at Central Hudson, and I manage a myriad of programs, including our demand response portfolio, and dynamic load management is only a subset of that. And we can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So DLM breaks into a few separate programs, commercial system relief being our longstanding and most participants as well in terms of the three. And we've got 2 payment options just to go over briefly for anyone who is new to JU-wide program. There's a reservation payment option, which means that you are getting to receive reservation payments for a pledge amount that you secure 1 month before the season starts. So that's a separate payment on top of performance payments. And then the voluntary payment option does not require full participation in all events, nor a test event, and a customer can sign up at any point, I believe, throughout the program. There are only payments for performance. Direct load control had been canceled in 2018 based on a lack of participation, so that includes BYOT, and that's due to poor BCA performance. And at the time, it was determined that in order to achieve a cost-effective program, significant funds would have to be diverted towards incentives as well as marketing. And at the time, it was not cost justified. And then lastly, Auto and Term DLM had its release of RFP last month for the vintage year 2026. Any intent to bid can be submitted before January 31st. More information can be found within the RFP filed in DMM under case 18E 0130. I hope that one's right. All right, I think we can go to the next slide, please, Kate. Okay, this is, again, just going into the basic requirements of the program for folks who aren't familiar. It's a summer-based demand response program right now. This year it was a hotter summer, similar to Andrew's point, and we had very clear event days due to the day ahead forecast. That, along with the lowering of our event trigger threshold, had led to 3 clear event days. So in the past, I'll get into it in the next slide, but at the beginning of the year, we figure out what our annual peak load is going to look like, and if the day ahead forecast indicates that we're within 94% of that estimated peak, then it's a clear indication of a demand response event that will be taking place the next day. So in the past, we had 97% as the threshold. That was lowered to 94, and that led to 2 additional events being called, to a total of 3. So customers also need to maintain 4 hours of load reduction. Usually it's leaning towards 3 to 4 hours for CSRP, because we've seen that larger commercial industrial customers need significant time to ramp up and ramp down. And then our demand response events will fall on weekdays between the hours of 12 a.m. and 8 p.m. This year, it was between the hours of 3 to 7 and 4 to 8. And lastly, we use the CBL methodology, which is available on our webpage. That's going to have a weather adjustment factor as well. I think that's it for this slide, Kate, if there are no questions. Okay, so again, 94% as our forecasted peak for dispatch. We had 34 participants this year. I believe that's 7 more than last year. Some of them were returning participants. I would say a majority of them were returning participants that had opted out of the program last year and had returned for 2025. We had 1 new enrollee that took up 1 megawatt of additional capacity for 2024. Sorry, my mistake, 2024. That led to 7,042 kilowatts for 2024, a big uptick. And I'll just note, 2023 here, you can see that we have 1 test event, similarly in 2022 as well. I would say that you can see that there was a significant drop in capacity.
To continue to scale it based on the system load. Yes. The same method using that. Okay. And I know you sort of talked about it, but and that's.
Sorry, one moment. We will unmute Marwa. Or Marwa, I think you can unmute yourself.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I was on about for 2023 was that 1 test event that we held. There were just no clear hot days to capture any load reduction. And just wasn't as hot of a summer, so our performance was 68%. Next slide, please. This just captures our 3 events for this year. I think anything notable would be that this year was the first time we called an unplanned event. I think historically they're unusual to be called. That means that it was on a Monday and there was no day ahead forecast accounted for, so it was a day of dispatch. It's a higher performance payment, and unplanned events do not factor into an aggregator or participant's performance factor for the year, nor does it affect their reservation payment amount. We also have performance factors for each event. Any questions on this slide? If not, we can move on to the next. Okay, tariff modifications to date. Much of this is being undergone through with the joint utilities as well, such as the NEM exclusion to be taken place by the end of the month. So NEM customers, folks under value stack tariffs, can participate in CSRP, but will forego any performance payments. Currently, Central Hudson does not have any NEM customers. All of our backup generator customers are through diesel generators. However, that might likely change with the commercial battery rebate implementation through NYSERDA. The J indicated utilities also enacted a payment model flexibility. Central Hudson took on that flexibility, and we did a fixed published price for both auto and term DLM in our RFPs. I see a question from Aaron.
Yeah, I wondered, because we were looking at that, and it appears that the fixed published price is actually lower than the CSRP price. And so the first question was, well, why would we want to do that? Can you provide some insight as to why that lower than CSRP price would be attractive?
Yeah, Aaron, I think I'm gonna have to look at that because it shouldn't be lower than the CSRP price. I'm hoping it's not. If I remember correctly, it's $1 per kW year, and essentially it should mimic CSRP to the T. CSRP's is per month of the season. So whatever CSRP's dollar is, it should be ×4 to account for the whole year in auto and term DLM. But I'll double check that for you.
Okay, yeah, it certainly wouldn't be the first time I've screwed up basic math questions, but you can see where it would be troubling if you get paid more for the short-term product than you would for the longer-term fixed one. So yeah, if you could take a look at that, it'd be great to know that I'm wrong. I'd rather be wrong in this case than right and have the price be lower. Thanks.
Yeah. I also hope you're wrong, no offense, but I will double check that. And it should be CSRP to a T. I will say that any bids coming at that price will be accepted. And then I think if it's incrementally greater and there's easily quantifiable benefits determined based on location, then an incrementally greater incentive rate bid by the customer or bidder may be accepted as well, or at least will be analyzed for bid acceptance. So although it's a fixed published price, there are some locational factors that go into it as well that are not published at this time. Any other questions on this? I realize I haven't gone through the full slide yet, so I will do that. Again, 97 to 94% threshold. I think that was just a part of us having a successful performance year. The other part is increased KW capacity, that one new enrollment giving us 1,000 kilowatts, as well as a hot summer and having some actual load to reduce. I've also listed some of our historic tariff modifications. I think one to note was that in 2016 we petitioned to increase our threshold from 92 to 97%, just because we were calling way too many events. And now we've kind of brought it back down to a nice middle ground. So we'll see where we go from here. I think in the future, if we do experience any significant customer fatigue similar to 2016, we may repetition with DPS to evaluate our threshold again. Any questions on this slide?
Hey, Mara, I got a question in the room here. Rob Cully from Department of Public Service. Do you happen to know if the events that were called this past year would also have been called under a 97% threshold? What I'm trying to get at is, was there an event? What would the number of events have been had the threshold not been modified in the previous order? Do you happen to know that offhand?
I actually figured it out during Con Ed's presentation because I had a feeling you would ask this. I was curious myself. So, had the threshold not lowered, we would have called one demand response event on the 16th of July. Because it was, we were able to call 3.
And does the 3, are those planned events only, or does that 3 number also include your unplanned event?
That 3 number includes our unplanned event. And then the one clear-cut event for the 97% threshold does not. It would be a planned event, essentially.
Okay, so you essentially had one unplanned event and 2 planned events this year.
Yes, correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Did I jump the gun on you, Marla?
No, you did great. Thank you, Kate. I'm just going to close out. Again, CSRP continues to use our 2016 MCOS values, marginal cost of service. That informs what our avoided distribution value from the program is. And we were able to achieve 112% in our performance this year for our portfolio, and we have no tariff modifications currently proposed for 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla.
Oh, Aaron Bradenbaugh, so I see that your hand is still up. Do you have another question, or is that a legacy hand raise? I'm gonna assume it's a legacy hand raise, and I'll lower that hand. I'm not seeing any other questions come in the chat. We'll give it a good 3 count. Feel free to raise hands, just chime in by unmuting yourself or type in the chat. And going once, going twice. Okay, I think we can move on to the next one.
Thank you, Marla. So next we're moving on to National Grid. We have Mike Smith here in the room.
Thanks, Rob. Can everybody hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh,
Yes, we
terrific.
can.
We can.
Thank you all. So to get started, Jeff Recca from National Grid is going to start us out. Jeff, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so as Mike said, I'm Jeff Recca. I'm our other program manager for our electric DR programs here in New York. Just to get us started off, I'm going to review our CSRP totals, kind of season at a glance. As everyone mentioned, it was hot this summer. We had a record number of events, a lot of consecutive events in our service territory this year. I believe this was 4 more than any prior year. And we also had some real strong performance. So as a percentage of commitment, we typically only see our portfolio performing mid to upper 80% of commitment on average, and we were close to or over 100% for most of July. Some more good news was our enrollment growth this year. We had 267 customers That's up from just about 215 last year. That didn't actually translate to a lot more capacity. We had a trend of a lot more customers coming in with lower capacity. Last year we were slightly lower, or we were quite a bit lower at just about 160 megawatts. But a lot of this growth in the actual megawatt capacity came from extremely large data center participants. But that just for CSRP, we were still averaging just under a megawatt per customer as capacity commitment. We didn't have any emergency events this season, other than the above average performance and the above average number of events. It was pretty unremarkable, but a successful season for CSRP. If you want to move to the next slide, I'll look at our trim DLM portfolio. So this was our third year of term DLM participation. The 2022 vintage year was finishing out this year. Across the 2022, 23, and 24 vintage years, we've got 46 customers committing 97 megawatts of capacity. Every day we had a CSRP event, we had a term DLM event this year. I've got the 618 event flagged as an emergency event or unplanned event. That was due to a dispatch failure on our end. There wasn't really a significant impact, but it was very, very slight delay. We were really about less than a half an hour late getting our dispatch out, so that was officially unplanned. As you can see by the numbers here, that didn't really impact performance much at all. It was pretty in line with the rest of the events. If you want to skip to the next slide, there's a little more on term DLM. I mentioned our first term DLM portfolio was 55 of that 67 megawatts. They are the 2022 vintage year, which concluded this year. We had 27 megawatts of our total coming in with the 2023 vintage year, and 15 coming in last year for 2024. Another the fourth vintage year, the 2025 vintage year, was issued in 2024 November. We've awarded 10 megawatts, 10.6 megawatts. One is under contract as of now for 1.5 megawatts. And we just released last month the RFP for the 2026 vintage year. We're currently accepting bids and will be through the end of February. Next slide, please. I think that brings us to DLC. At present, our DLC program is Bring Your Own Thermostat program, Connected Solutions. We had no changes to the program for this capability period. We saw a smaller uptick than usual in customer enrollments. We finished the year 2024 with 26,701 enrolled thermostats, which is up from the 25,147 we finished out 2023 with. But that's off. Our typical growth had been closer to 4,000 to 5,000 new thermostats a year. There's probably a variety of factors at play there. I think we're going to, on a later slide, address potential for increasing our enrollment incentive, hopefully translating to a return to the growth we saw in the earlier years of the program. This program we call when we call CSRP and term DLM. So as you can see, we had 10 events again here. Performance was in line with previous years, which that was a little surprising. considering not just the number, but the frequency of events, and several back-to-back events. Historically, we haven't really seen much drop off with when customers are called, drop off in performance. I mean, when customers are called on consecutive days. The average reduction per device, we were still averaging over a kilowatt per device, and that I think is we've got a pretty healthy program in terms of customer engagement. I've looked back at our numbers, and it does seem that the bulk of the customers who are in the program still have been in the program for more than one season. So we don't see a lot of attrition. The most of our attrition is due to when we actively go through our enrollees and check to make sure that everyone's devices are still connected and able to participate, which does result in removing roughly 2,000 customers every year from the program. And that's potentially a result of folks moving, getting different devices. There's a lot of factors at play there, and then we do remove customers who don't perform at all, 0 minutes of performance on the season, and that does help contribute to that strong average reduction per device, because we're seeing that of that 26,000 customers in the program, that we're not carrying folks who don't want to be in the program or choose to opt out of events too frequently. But we do hope to see in the next year an uptick again in the enrollments. I think there's some challenges there, just given the size of the program already, and limitations of housing stock in upstate New York. The prerequisite for the program is that you have central air, and it's controlled by a smart thermostat. So the smart thermostat only gets us halfway there, and there's only about 135,000 of them per our partners that are deployed within the state. So we'd like to see higher numbers of smart thermostat uptake. I said within the state, I meant our service territory. Sorry, the 135,000 smart thermostats is upstate New York. And I think that concludes DLC. Mike, you want to take it to the program changes?
Again, yeah, it looks like we have a question from Bill Ackerdor. I want to let Bill have his question.
Sure.
Great. Thanks. Jeff, if you could go back to slide 4, just wanted to check on the on the amount of under contract. I mean, as we look at slide 4 here, we going from 55 megawatts down to 27, 15, 1.5 megawatts in 2025. That's quite a decline, and they're going not the direction we want to see. Was hoping you might want to comment a little bit on what you think is going on and how we might reverse that trend, because I think that's something obviously our organization is concerned about.
Jeff, this is Mike. I can take that one.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Great point. I think we agree. I think really that first contract being so large in a single contract sort of may bias the overall data. But yeah, I think the feedback we've gotten from companies who decide to or not to participate in the offering versus CSRP is that there are strings attached to term DLM in terms of potential penalty for underperformance that don't exist for CSRP, as well as a sort of long-term commitment, which we had hoped would be universally attractive benefit to customers and aggregators, but I think in some cases may not be due to certain uncertainty of customer long-term interest in those aggregations. And so, I think aggregators have a very difficult job in deciding what the best program fit is for their portfolios, because they have to consider not only today, but in the case of term DLM, 3, or really almost 4+ years from now, it will be the final year of their contract. So I think those are the considerations that aggregators have to make as they consider to bid into or not bid into the program. And I think that is why we see that specific decline sort of in year 4, when the large contract would have been sort of up for re-enrollment in term DLM. I think it's something we're certainly concerned about, and we have an open procurement now. We'll continue to watch, and if it becomes a longer term trend of participation across the board, then I think we'll need to understand why it's happening and how we can address it.
Okay. So the main thing you think is going on is the concern with the penalties and the level of commitment that you're hearing from industry and from aggregators.
Yeah, I think those are certainly two that we've heard. That there may be others. I think CSRP and that model is something that's sort of well understood. The folks who participate are comfortable with. Customers are used to. It sort of meshes well with what they do, say, with the NISO. I think term DLM is something that the market is still trying to figure out. I think certainly penalty risk is a concern. And then again, that long-term contract again becomes a positive or negative depending on sort of your certainty in your long-term portfolio. So that's the feedback we've heard.
Yeah, that might be a little bit technology dependent also. I mean, I think the energy storage suppliers are less concerned about the penalties than others may be, but this would be interesting. We'll want to dig in further with you on this.
Great. Kate, would you mind jumping back ahead to program changes slide? Yeah. So a couple program changes to highlight. As Marwa mentioned, indicated utilities had petitioned for procurement flexibility for the term and ODLM solicitations on November 19th. We received approval to implement an additional option in our procurements, in addition to the sealed bid pay as bid model, to use a fixed published price model as appropriate and as needed for companies to try to drive participation in the programs. National Grid opted to use that model for its auto DLM program procurement that went out on December 1st. And retained the sealed bid pay as bid model for term DLM since it had been successful in securing megawatts and number of bids over the years. We don't believe at this time we need to pivot, but we will watch the results of both and sort of continuously evaluate our processes to see how we can best operate these procurements to drive participation and competition. Bill, I see a hand. Is that a hand again or old hand?
Sorry, it was a legacy.
Okay, just checking.
Hi, this is Rick Schuler. I raised my hand. So when you say you're going to continue to watch how the change to the pay as bid, where have you done any analysis though thus far?
We don't. So I guess, Rick, we don't have results yet of like up until this current RFP. All procurements for term and auto DLM were the sealed bid pay as bid model, right? And so this is the first time we are using a different option for one of the programs. And so I guess after this one We're accepting bids through the end of February. You know, we'll then have some data, at least for auto DLM, on the comparison point of the two options, and if one option drives a change in interest participation, things like that. I would say at this point we don't have data on the outcome, but look forward to getting some and applying it. Yeah.
All right, so check back after February is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. And I think after each procurement round, we typically do a check-in, so we'll add that to that discussion.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And then moving on, a few changes to the DLC program. As Jeff had alluded to, we have seen slowdown in the growth of our connected solutions. You know, bring your own thermostat program. The program still grew this year over last year, but you know, I think somewhere around the 1,500 thermostats range, where we have been growing 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 devices a year. You know, and I think there's probably a lot of reasons that may have happened. Maybe we're reaching some saturation point. I hope not. I think we may have captured a lot of the early adopters who were not only really gung-ho about smart thermostat technology, but also about, you know, providing grid services with their home. And you know, I hope there are still customers out there interested in signing up to do this. And I think perhaps there's another wave of customers who are interested, perhaps on the fence, maybe just got a thermostat, haven't quite taken the leap to join our program yet. And we're hopeful that a boost in the enrollment incentive can help spur that group of customers to sign up. I think we've surveyed sort of programs across the country that have seen success by increasing the enrollment incentive a little bit. It is a helpful nudge to get customers on board. So we're hopeful and believe that it will be a factor to kind of help us pick up the growth rate to where we've seen it and where we would like it to be. And lastly, we have a proposal to add bring your own battery program to direct load control, but we will cover that in a separate presentation later today. That's it.
Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to NYSEG RGV?
I don't see any in the chat, and I don't see any hands up. So let's just give it a solid 3 count, and then we'll move on. So going once, going twice. Okay, on to the next presentation.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I had myself on mute before. But yeah, this is Andrew Ladra here, program manager for NYSEG and RG&E for demand response programs. And I have joined with me Emily McKee. I'll let her introduce herself quickly again.
Hello again, Emily McKee. I'm the energy specialist for the NYSEG and RG&E demand response programs.
And we will be covering over our CNI and BYOT programs. So starting off here with CSRT, in 2024, NYSEG, we called 8 events. 5 of those were planned events, and 3 of those were unplanned. And compared to last year, we had 4 events called. So obviously uptick this year, as indicated by other utilities. Obviously we had some heat waves this past year. So that's why we had more events. For RG&E, we had 5 events, which 3 were planned and 2 were unplanned. Compared to last year, RG&E not last year, but 2023, we had one test event, 1 hour test event. So definitely an uptick there as well. And I know part of that was due to decreasing our event threshold trigger for RG&E. And in 2022 and 2023, we had a combined total of, I believe it was 2 events with one unplanned event, test event. And so down at the chart below, for a reservation, CSRP, NYSEG, we had about 46,600 kW in road relief, about 103 meters. Now here I have average monthly payment performance factors. So what that means is those are essentially capped performance factors, meaning if a site performed greater than 1.0, that was not encapsulated in that. So for NYSEG, we had a 0.66 performance factor. And then our average load relief, which I guess you could say is our true performance factor, that was about 42,741 kW. And that equates to, I believe it was about a 90, just confirming here, 92% essentially performance factor. RG&E, again, 7,000, around 7,000 kW in road relief, about 57 meters, 0.79 average monthly performance factor, with our average load relief around 6,000, which equates to a 87% performance factor. And then next slide, we'll cover historical enrollment for CSRP. So we had about a 10.5% increase from enrolled load from the previous year. So you could see starting in 2022, every year we've seen a slight increase, both for NYSEG and RG&E. RG&E has seen the greatest growth year over year, compared to last year compared to 2023 to 2024, it was about a 23% increase. So we're pretty happy to see more customers enrolling in our program there. And then just quick high level points here. Our maximum enrolled load for NYSEG was in 2020, while RG&E was in 2018. And I think that's it for next slide for CSRP. Oh, yeah. I guess any questions on CSRP before I move on to term and auto DLM? Okay. For term and auto DLM, we released our summer 2025 capability period RFP back in 2023 of November. As you can see here in the chart, we've received 0 bids since the 2023 capability period. And as indicated by other utilities, we have implemented a new procurement methodology for the fixed price method. And so, unfortunately, NYSEG and RG&E released our RFP December 2nd. That did not include that fixed price methodology. So after discussions with staff, we agreed that we're going to cancel that RFP. And I will be setting out a new one at the end of this month for the summer of 2026 capability to include the fixed price methodology in there. And obviously, since it's about a month and a half delay there, the timeline of accepted bids will be moved out. And then I think it's on to BYOT, which Emily will cover.
Yeah, so our direct load control program is called Smart Savings Rewards. That's our Bring Your Own Thermostat program. In 2024, we called 8 events for NYSEG and 4 for RG&E. NYSEG has a 90% threshold for event calling, and RG&E has a 94% threshold. Compared to 2023, that was a slight increase in number of events. Last year we had, or sorry, in 2023 we had 7 events at NYSEG and 2 at RG&E. Let's see, for average load shed per device, we're at 0.95 kilowatts for NYSEG and 1.2 kilowatts for RG&E, which is a slight increase compared to 2023. Participation average, however, is down about 2 to 3% per company compared to the previous year. But again, even though participation has decreased slightly, we are seeing an increase in average shed per device. And I think we can go to the next slide unless anyone has questions. Okay, and then for program growth, we're up to just over 20,000 thermostats for NYSEG and just over 16,000 for RG&E. We did see, similar to National Grid, a little bit slower enrollment rates this year, an average of 205 thermostats per month for NYSEG and 156 a month at RG&E. Those rates are about half of 2023, where we were seeing an average of over 400 thermostats per month enrolling at NYSEG and over 300 a month at RG&E. But in discussions with some of the vendors we work with to run this program, they've relayed to us that this is not unique to NYSEG and RG&E. They have seen decreased thermostat sales across the board, different utilities, different regions in the United States. But the good news there is they've estimated that based on the number of households that have central air conditioning, we still have plenty of room for growth. They think we've only got about 7% of eligible households enrolled. So there's, like I said, still plenty of opportunity to see this program grow and continue gaining enrollments. Any questions? Okay.
And I'll finish off.
Andrew.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thanks, Emily. I'll finish off here. Kind of guess titled misleading program modifications in a way. But you know, we have a residential battery storage program in the queue, and more information will be shared with the indicated utilities joint presentation. And I have here listed, and I wrote this in my report, in our company's long-term gas planning report that was released last year at some point. I did mention that we would have a natural gas DR pilot. Our idea would be to target our residential customers in the Rochester and its outer area. And we will be taking lessons learned from our Avangrid Connecticut utilities, which have a gas DR program running the last, I believe, 2-3 years now. And we're applying those lessons learned to this future pilot. And we're in discussion to tentatively begin 2025-2026 winter capability period. My goal is to have some sort of implementation plan submitted by the end of February this year. Again, everything is more on the tentative side. As things, you know, go smoothly, then we will have something for the end of this year. Um, but yeah, that's all I have. Any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment, and I don't see any hands raised. Give it a another good 3 count here. Going once, going twice. Okay.
Thank you, Andrew and Emily. Okay, next we're gonna bring up O&R. Desmond, are you or John going to be?
Yes, it's going to be me.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Desmond Ofori, and I have been with ONR for a couple of years now. And I'll be the one giving you the presentation for today. Next slide, please. I'll be talking about giving you guys a gist of the program, as to how we did in terms of the 2024 capability period, and then dive a little bit more into details into our commercial programs, CSRP and DLRP, as well as our residential program, our BIOT program. And then touch just a little bit on our residential program. The JU has already planned a presentation for this meeting. So it will be just a little bit that I will be touching upon. And then I will be talking about our term and auto DLM program, as well as any tariff changes that we propose for the 2025 capability period. Next slide, please. For the 2024 capability period, we continue to see a decrease in megawatt enrollments, which has been a trend since COVID. Most of the conversations I've had with some of the aggregators are being customers vacating buildings, buildings changing owners, and things of that nature. So it has forced aggregators to remove some of these customers from their portfolio, as well as have some of them decrease pledges. And this has been a trend that's continued. But now we have seen some stability since 2022 to 2024. And we believe that from here on, we will be able to, with our marketing strategy, we will be able to increase pledges moving forward. Our commercial programs saw an increase in customer enrollments, most of them being residential customers, but that did not really move the needle when it comes to the overall megawatt enrollments. And for our CSRP and DLRP programs, we saw a slight decrease in performance. We saw a 1% decrease from 87 to 88 with the CSRP program, and a 10% decrease from 82% to 92%. Our BIOT program continued to see program growth. And this year we called a total of 7 events, 3 of them being CSRP, 1 being we called a total of 6 events and 1 test event, with 3 of the events being CSRP and BYOT, and then the 1 test event being DLRP. And again, we ran all the numbers through our program, and they passed our BCA with a value of greater than 1. Next slide, please. For our commercial programs, we had an increase in participation. We went from 257 from last year to 278 participants, most of them being residential customers. and then a slight decrease in megawatt enrollments of a 0.2 from 2023 to 2024. We went from 8 to 7.8, and we for the 3 events that were called, it was a hot summer, but for our CSRP, our trigger threshold is 92%. We only reached that 3 times in terms of the day ahead forecast. And all of these events were planned events. All of them were notified within the notification window, advanced notification window. We realized an average performance of 87%. And again, as for the reasons that I gave, we continue to see I continue to see a decrease in enrollments since COVID. Next slide, please. Again, for our DLRP program, we had a total of 279 participants for the 2024 capability period, which is an increase from 2023 of 264. We also saw a 0.3 decrease in megawatt enrollments. Again, attributing the same reasons as to CSRP. We continue to see similar trend with both programs in terms of decrease in megawatt enrollments. Only 1 test event was called on August 1st, and we realized a performance factor of 82%. Next slide, please. For the Bring Your Own Thermostat program, we have 6,100 participants, which equates to 6.1 megawatts as of the filing. But when I was doing this presentation, I did go through it again, and right now we are up to 6,200 participants, 6.2 megawatts. And in the 2024 capability period, we did an analysis to remove historically inactive participants from the program, and that did give us an accurate performance calculations, as well as gave us customers that we can depend on in terms of greater reliability. And we called 3 events for our BYOT program and realized an average reduction of 4.8 megawatts. We also run the program through our marketplace, which is called My ORU Store, and we enrolled approximately 300 participants into the program during the 2024 season. And the program helps the marketplace helps us to be able to pair EE and DR rebates and make it easier for customers to be able to go through the EE as well as the DR program. Next slide, please. We are going to be, as a JU, we are going to be talking a bit more about the residential storage program that we anticipate could commence the 2025 capability period. Just to give you guys a little bit information about it. It's going to be a residential and small commercial customer program, and we are going to be using telemetry data. The event performance will be the average of the hourly performance for the event. And when we ran the numbers through our BCA, we came up with $50 per kW for the incentive. which I believe the other utilities might have similar numbers as well. Next slide, please. For the term and auto DLM programs, we did not see any bids for the 2024 and 2025 vintage years. For the 2026 vintage year, we released our RFP on December 30th, with the response deadline being February 28th and award notifications going out April 7th. And we plan to execute the contract that on June 9th from there. Next slide, please. In terms of tariff changes, we did not propose any tariff change for the upcoming capability period 2025. We made modifications to our DLM procurement mechanism filed on November 30th, which allows the flexibility of using either the seal bid, pay as bid model or fixed published price model. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Des, do you have a sense of what the kilowatts reduction is per device in your BYOT? Is it similar to the other utilities at roughly a kilowatt per device?
For us, it's about 0.57 per device. Usually we've seen a trend of the first hour, customers tend to go at the first couple of hours, customers tend to go at 100%, and then the consecutive hours, 2 hours, we see a slight, a significant decrease in terms of load shed. And that has been a trend for all our events that we've called.
So having a fair amount of customer opt out in the middle of the event.
In the middle of the event, correct.
I am not seeing any hands raised, and I don't see any questions in the chat. So we'll give it the old 3 count. Going once. Going twice. All right, so I think we're going to move on to the discussion on. Thanks, Des. On the discussion on the residential energy storage direct load control program component. So, Mike, okay, that's you. I'll pass this over.
Thank you. All right, this is Mike Smith from National Grid. I will be taking on the presentation for, I guess, the indicated utilities, Central Hudson, National Grid, NYSEG RG&E, and ONR, in our summary of our proposed battery storage programs within direct load control. Next slide. So just, a little bit about the program. The customers we're targeting, we're looking at customers we think are generally not well served by our CSRP, for example. So residential, small commercial customers, same customers identified within the DLC tariff, customers served at distribution voltage, and customers that may or may not have interval metering, but interval metering would not be a requirement of this program. The structure of the program is similar to the thermostat model, a bring your own battery model, you could call it. It's for customers who have either already installed or seek to install an energy storage system. And the key highlight of the sort of bring your own model is that there's not an upfront incentive. The incentives we're proposing are annual performance-based incentives that are provided to customers for providing us grid services. There are other opportunities for customers to get upfront incentives to buy down the cost. Federal tax credits. NYSERDA is working on upfront storage incentives for storage in New York. We hope to take those customers and get them off the sidelines and participating in DR. So performance measurement for the program, I think, is a big consideration. As I mentioned, we're not looking to take an interval metering based approach. We're looking to use storage telemetry, which provides power output of the system to measure performance. Customer performance will be measured on the output of the storage system during the event hours as compared to their baseline system performance during the same window on non-event days. A key point would be that all storage output, including net exports, would be considered and credited in their performance calculation. So customers not just reducing their home or business load, they could be exporting during the event. Sort of an example of how that might look is if a customer battery participates in the event, discharges 3 kilowatts average across hour 1, 2 kilowatts across hour 2, 4 kilowatts across hour 3. The performance for the event is the average of these 3 hours, 3 kilowatts. Next slide, please. Customer incentives then follow this event level performance carried across the entire season. And so compensation is, again, performance-based and based upon the customer's average performance across all of the events in the season. So carrying our example from before, a customer performed an average of 3 kilowatts in event 1. We have 3 more events where they average 3 kilowatts, 4 kilowatts, and 2 kilowatts. We simply average the performance across those events to have a 3 kilowatt average performance for the season. Each company will determine the appropriate incentive for their program, for their avoided cost structure that maximizes the compensation to customers for the benefit they provide, while also allowing the program to remain cost effective. And then, each company's annual incentive would be calculated as the calculated dollar per kilowatt year incentive multiplied by the season performance. Using our 3 kilowatt average season performance example, and let's say $50 a kilowatt year incentive rate that's been calculated, that customer would be eligible for $150 performance incentive. These incentives are paid each year at the end of the year, so the customer can keep participating, keep earning this revenue over time, and the incentives will be paid directly to customers or can be assigned to a service provider with written approval. Next slide. So you've heard sort of a little bit about what the program is. I think it's important to also discuss why. I think we've seen residential small commercial customers needing separate treatment than large commercial customers in DR programs. And this model removes barriers to participation for these customers. It doesn't require interval metering, which has long been a barrier to market DR program participation. And it allows the customer to have a more hands-off approach to participate. They don't need to have direct active participation in each event to be able to participate in a DR program. Their device manufacturer can leverage an API. The utility can communicate to the device partner can communicate to the customer. The event performance process can be automated. The customer doesn't have to take an active role, but they get the benefits of participating. We think that the bring your own model, again, leverages that very unique and important, consumer relationship for these residential small commercial battery manufacturers. This is a key driver of why our bring your own thermostat programs work, is the customer relationship with the device provider. They have an app, they have an ongoing relationship, they're engaging constantly. It allows us to leverage that relationship to get customers to not only to sign up, but to participate in events and keep participating and keep engaged. And it offers, again, the flexibility that we may have a customer sign up right when they install their storage system, or they may sign up later when they've noticed that there's something available to them in their their battery app or so on. And ultimately, it just recognizes that residential and small commercial customers are different from large commercial customers. The way they think about energy, think about energy costs, maybe not as an operating expense, but as a burden perhaps, or otherwise, it allows us to sort of meet the customer where they are. And even, if the customer has interval metering, I think we recognize that, treating them same as a large commercial customer may not be the best way to engage with these customers, to get them participating in a program with a device that has, a lot of power to provide grid services. And again, I think we've seen success in taking this approach with this customer segment with thermostats, and feel that this is sort of a natural progression to take a similar approach with storage devices. Next slide. And just to wrap up here, a little table of sort of utility timelines and incentives as they stand today. I think National Grid, NYSEG, RG, and ONR are, tentatively prepared to have a program launched in summer of 2025. I think, depending on if and when we receive approval to move forward. But I think we all have the appetite to get this going and engage these customers as soon as we can. And each company has gone through a BCA analysis and determined that $50 per kilowatt year incentive is both appropriate to the customer, but allows their programs to be cost effective. And Marwa, I'll let you speak to Central Hudson.
Thanks, Mike. Although Central Hudson is in line with how Mike has described the implementation of the BYOB program, within our annual report, we provided a launch recommendation that upon conducting a BCA, we found that it would be cost effective to launch at this time in 2025, and we've recommended launch after the MCO study is revised in coordination with staff. And once that's complete, it's much more likely that the company, Central Hudson, can achieve a cost-effective residential battery program. In terms of estimated incentive, we find that once revised, the MCOs will contribute towards an estimated incentive comparable to the other utilities, such as National Grid, NYSEG, and ONR.
Thanks, Mara. Rick, I see a hand up. You have a question?
Yeah, I think Mara may have started to answer my question. I was wondering how the $50 per kilowatt year estimated incentive numbers were calculated.
Yeah, so the estimated incentive is going to be based off of the benefits that we quantify, the avoided T&D as well as avoided GCC. However, the level of incentive doesn't affect the societal cost test. You could have it as high or as low as possible. It doesn't really move the needle on SCT. So what's driving the SCT is those avoided benefits, yes, but less so incentive costs, more so implementation contractor costs.
Because that's why I'm trying to figure out if these are really resource savings, then it's not like the kind of transfer payment that would not impact the SCT.
Right.
So
ultimately, based off of the benefits right now, we hope it's not less than $50 per kW a year, because we don't think that would be attractive to customers. Should benefits increase, we could hopefully provide more value in the incentive.
So can the other utilities shed some more light on how they came up with the $50 per kilowatt year number?
Sure, Rick, this is Mike from National Grid. I guess I can speak to the approach we took. We, within our BCA model, know our claimable benefits, avoided costs. We have some known and some estimated program operating costs that we've been able to collect from other programs, other companies, and we're able to then sort of plug in an incentive value, a customer incentive to that model that allowed us to still achieve a sort of cost-effective BCA model. So it's based on known and estimated program costs versus the known program benefits we have.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I guess like also wondering like to the extent that these actually reflect resource savings, like was there a thought to calling them performance payments instead of performance incentives?
So I think that it is that is we consider the performance incentive, performance payment the same. I think if there is a preference to the language used, I think our intent behind the value is the same as the performance payments we pay to other DR programs. So if there is a concern with incentive versus performance payment, that happy to make that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would cause Marwood to do her SCT differently.
Oh, yeah, good question.
I don't think so, Rick, based off of how I've kind of played with the numbers so far.
Okay.
Yeah. But in any case, again, our SCT it's really just like all the implementation contractor costs greatly outweigh any incentive we would distribute to customers at this point in time.
Okay.
Now, if I could ask maybe a follow-up on that, are the contractor implementation contractor costs relatively fixed? So like, would we expect to see, and I'm thinking about kind of some lessons learned from the beginnings of the BYOT program, right? 10 years ago now. That basically we had some pretty big startup costs with getting the program stood up, but then as you add more and more thermostats, your program costs per thermostat calculation kind of goes down, and then there's break points where you need to subscribe to the next higher level of service with your implementation contractor, so that kind of changes things up again at certain step points. But is that relatively the same way to think about how we would expect this program to go forward, or do the implementation costs expected to be roughly keeping up in line with the number of devices enrolled here?
Yeah, this again is Mike Smith. I can speak from National Grid's perspective. In our experience, like thermostats, the cost per battery for the separate program are largely variable costs. It's just one more device is one more of X cost, one more of Y cost. There's not, in some cases, there's no fixed cost, or there is a fixed cost for the first X number of devices, right? And then once you're past that, it's just incremental. And so I think that there will be, economies of scale to an extent as we grow on things like administration, but many of the sort of device level fees to be able to sort of leverage these APIs, control these devices are on a per device level. And so what we did when looking at our sort of desired incentive was got to a point where if you have 5 batteries in the program, that level of fixed cost is overwhelming to those 5 batteries. But at a certain point, it sort of evens out to what the variable costs are, and then so we made sure we got past that sort of artificial burden for the very beginning startup costs, and got to a point where the steady state costs were considered.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And this is Andrew from Nice Energy, and I can speak a little bit on our side. we did go through an RFP. We did have an RFP last year, which we did select a vendor at the end of 2024. And as Mike, said, there's some fixed costs included, but mostly it is variable. And some of this is through, again, there's battery site fees, and then there's battery API fees. So it also depends on how many enrollments we have. Obviously, the more enrollments we get, the better, I'd say. And, we have some sort of idea of how many enrollments we'd have potentially starting in 2025. But obviously, that's still a little bit unknown until we see kind of how the first year, how that looks like. And then obviously, we'll reevaluate again at the end of the year and change incentives, for example, as needed.
Yeah, this is John Hilowitz from ONR. I would echo what Mike said. We really ran our analysis in a similar way, taking a look at what the potential fixed costs are of the first year. We do anticipate that there are going to be those fixed costs, Rob, kind of like you mentioned, startup fees, setup costs, things like that. And then where we would ultimately need to be at scale. So I guess from an ONR perspective, I think that we're following suit very closely with the rest of our partner utilities here.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any questions coming in through the chat. And I don't see any more hands up. So we'll give it a 3 count, and then we'll move on to Con Edison's proposal in the residential storage space. So going once, going twice. All right, Alex and Jeriana, go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. So Con Edison, we're proposing a slightly different approach to residential storage. And before I get into the details, I want to paint a picture of residential growth in Con Edison service territory for CSRP and DLRP in total. So looking back in 2021, when we first started enrolling residential customers, we had around 4,000 residential participants, and that has grown to over 36,000 this year. So we've seen pretty significant growth in terms of customer count for residential customers participating in CSRP and DLRP. And there's a few things that have contributed to this, both on the aggregator side and the work that we've done at Con Edison. So building out our DRMS, so making sure we're able to handle all of these enrollments and that our systems are in place and set up in a way that we can handle the enrollments, validations, going through all of the AMI data, which is key for running CSRP and DLRP, and then ultimately calculating everything to pay out aggregators to then pay out the customer. And how this relates to storage, we see CSRP and DLRP or some structure that involves the aggregator model as a path forward for residential storage in order to utilize all of the work that Con Edison has done and the way that aggregators have taken this structure and really have run with it, as shown by the number of residential customers that have participated and continue to grow. So for storage specifically, we see an aggregator model as the path forward. In terms of scope, right now it's pretty limited to Westchester because of FDNY limitations in New York City, but still in Westchester, there is a pretty good opportunity for residential storage. We looked at our interconnections and identified over 400 batteries, residential batteries that were installed in Westchester that account for 3.6 megawatts of capacity. So already there are a number of residential storage systems out there in Con Edison service territory. And of those 400, we have identified 41 that are already participating in CSRP and DLRP. So they're solar plus storage, most of them are solar plus storage systems, and they're enrolling with aggregators, participating in CSRP and DLRP. And I do think that there is more to learn from that. So I'm not saying that there's nothing to learn from a storage specific model, but we can still look at our AMI data, look to see how solar and storage are participating in our service territory through these aggregators that we're working with. And these 41 that we have now, that accounts for 343 kilowatts of capacity in DR currently. So I do think that there's a space for residential storage. We've done a lot with aggregators to grow the residential market, and the aggregators are already starting to think about solar and storage. And we can definitely think through how we might want to utilize this information and parse through it a little further. But this is the current state and scope of what we think about. And I think I do agree that the key difference is that we do have AMI. So that has definitely shown its success in the growth in CSRP and DLRP, going from 4,000 customers in 2021 to over 36,000 this year. So AMI is definitely the special driving force behind a lot of this. And then aggregators, which we have identified over 10 aggregators that work with residential customers and are looking into integrating with solar, or sorry, not solar, storage for DR. So it's happening. And I do agree that there's definitely more that we can do, and we can talk through what that might look like. But next slide. With this model, we utilize our existing DRMS, we utilize the AMI network, and we utilize the current established tariff framework and the aggregators that are already putting in the work to look into storage, residential storage specifically. And because of this, we have this technology agnostic whole home approach. So customers participating, we look at not just technology specific, but all of the AMI data coming from that home. So anything that the customer does shows up in their AMI data for calculation for demand response and can then get compensated accordingly. And it additionally sparks the aggregator and OEM integration. I think there's more work that we can do with that, looking into how can we get that 41 closer to that 400, because obviously there is a gap, and we can do things within this model to address that and get more customers participating, working with aggregators, talking to OEMs, and working on marketing for these ones that are installed, and then in the queue, or potentially customers that are interested in enrolling or getting a storage system, working with them to participate in demand response. So customer journey, a high level overview of what this would look like. They would get a battery, they would enroll with an aggregator, and we can help with that facilitation between the OEM, the battery OEM, the aggregator, and us. The aggregator, they enroll with the aggregator then enrolls with our programs. When an event is called, the aggregator is responsible for making sure that battery participates, but then at the end of the season, we compensate the aggregator, who then compensates the customer. So that in a nutshell is what our idea is. Definitely open to feedback and ways that we can utilize what we already have, but then also address some gaps that we see moving forward to make sure we're utilizing these batteries in the most efficient way possible.
Thanks, Jerry. So-
Yeah, it's neat to hear that you've already got kind of 10% of the existing market already in the programs. So I think that's a fairly significant difference between Con Edison's experience and elsewhere, right? I know like Long Island has something last I saw had somewhere on the order of 700 to 800 batteries installed, and I think that's a fairly stale number, probably from last year, so it's probably more now. But was having trouble with coming up with ways to get those folks off the sidelines. So that was really our impetus in asking the utilities in the last demand response order to start developing these programs. So I think at least from my perspective, we typically approach these sort of questions of differences in programmatic design as is what's good for the goose good for the gander, and trying to be as consistent statewide as possible. But I think we also need to recognize where there is a significant difference in underlying conditions, and if something's working in Con Edison service territory and getting customers into these programs or off the sidelines like we want, there's also a certain amount of don't break what ain't broken, that we have to think through as well. Any comments or questions from the phone? I'm not seeing any questions in chat, and I don't see any hands up at the moment. So we'll give it the 3 count and then move on to our wrap up here. So going once, going twice. All right, Kate, why don't you bring us home?
Okay. Bring it on in. So, we had a lot of unaddressed comments that came in through the chat. But I will say, if anybody does have questions that they think of later, they can certainly either submit them to me in the email address that's on the secretary's notice. Though if it's questions that we want to include in the commission order coming up, I suggest you submit them into DMM with the SAPA public comment period. Backtrack a little bit, the presentations, the recording will be uploaded into the DMM system by January 10th. The SAPA comment period for the utility DLM filings ends on February 24th. But certainly feel free to submit comments beforehand. You can always submit follow-up comments, but again, any questions that came up today, you can reach out to me or submit them into DMM. with the second comment.
Yeah, I'll just add that we always try to get the commission's eyes on these program changes and anything like that that have a definite start time for the program each year, right? Most utilities begin their operations of these programs in May. Central Hudson begins in June. And we generally like to have the rules really finalized before the end of the enrollment period. But we are operating again on a tight schedule this year for the end of the SAPA comment period to the relevant commission sessions. So if you have comments, please submit them early if you can. We'd love to hear from you. Good, bad, or otherwise, all comments are helpful. And hopefully we have another successful operating year coming up, maybe a little less hot, a little less interesting.
Okay. Well, if nobody has anything else, I'm gonna appreciate you all, joining us today for the annual stakeholder session. Maybe next year we can bring more of you into Albany or maybe New York, I don't know. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. With that, we'll end.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, we will stop recording.